Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the cell. I've done a lot of videos where we deal with things that go on inside of them, but I haven't done one where we just talk about the entire structure of them. So a good place to start is, let me just draw the membrane. And the cellular membrane is a good place to start because this is what separates the cell from the outside world. And to a large degree, it kind of defines the cell. It defines it as this very, very small compartment. That's where the word cell came from. So let me label that. Cellular membrane. And all cells have a cellular membrane. Now, if we think about maybe the most important thing that defines a cell, you've called a nucleus. And I said that's a major division because when some people looked at some cells and they saw nucleus and other cells and they didn't see nucleus, they say, hey, this is a good way to classify organisms. So they called things that had nucleuses eukaryotes. These have a nucleus. So as I've drawn this cell right here, it is a eukaryote. Now, if you do not have a nucleus, you are dealing with a prokaryote. No nucleus. And examples of prokaryotes, the two big groups of them are bacteria and archaea. And archaea are really interesting. We know very, very little about them. They were originally thought to be types of bacteria, but now people are realizing that they're this whole completely other group, and we've actually observed a very small subset of them. So it's a very fascinating group. And it actually turns out that evolutionarily speaking, you shouldn't make this division first, that it actually makes more sense to divide things into eukaryotes. I'll just write that, euc, bacteria, ribosome. And if all this talk of DNA transcription into mRNA and mRNA leaving the nucleus and traveling to the ribosome to be translated into proteins makes no sense to you, there are several videos where I go into that in detail. But what I want to do is just focus on all of the different parts to kind of give a big picture of things. So ribosomes are where mRNA that gets transcribed inside the nucleus from DNA, where it gets translated into proteins. So you can kind of view them as the place where information actually turns into proteins, which then can be used anywhere else in the cell. Now, one interesting, and these ribosomes, they're made up of proteins, and actually they're made up of RNA. And so one question is, well, where are the pieces of the ribosomes made? Well, some are made by proteins, which might be made in other ribosomes. But some of it, the mRNA ribosomes, you can kind of view them as this big, this mess if you were to look detailed. There's some protein there, and I'm not drawing it that realistically, but then you have some mRNA. Cytosol. But what if we wanted to produce proteins that are supposed to end up maybe in the membrane of the cell, or maybe outside of the cell itself? Cells produce things that are used by other cells, that are used by the rest of the body. And here we have to go to proteins that are attached to this membrane. You can kind of view it as a bunch of tunnels. Let me see how well I can draw it. I'm going to draw it very roughly. You have this thing called the endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. You can just view it as a bunch of tunnels like that. Endoplasmic reticulum. And they eventually lead to something called Golgi bodies, named after Mr. Golgi himself. So I'll do the endoplasmic reticulum in yellow, and I'll do the Golgi bodies. I'll do the Golgi bodies in green, maybe, just like that. And I'll tell you in a second what they are. So this is kind of a big kind of stack, or you can kind of view it as a bunch of folded membranes together. And some ribosomes are actually attached to this part, which I call the endoplasmic reticulum. So we have ribosomes attached. Some of them are free, some of them are attached. And let me write my labels down. So this right here, and we use the space over here. This big flap of convoluted membrane, that's the endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. It's fun to say. Endoplasmic reticulum. Maybe a good name for a band. Endoplasmic reticulum. And the parts that have ribosomes attached to it are called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Maybe even a better name for a band. So right here, where I've attached ribosomes, So these ribosomes are attached right here. This is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or maybe the rough ER. The rough ER, ER standing for endoplasmic reticulum. And then where we don't have any ribosomes attached, that's the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So right here, that is the smooth